The grand starlight chamber, a colossal arena of diplomacy, buzzed with a cacophony of alien dialects as representatives from across the galaxy gathered. In the midst of this controlled chaos, Captain Elias Hawthorne stood, a solitary human figure, his presence commanding silence as he adjusted the microphone. "Ladies, gentlemen, and esteemed beings of the Galactic Council," Hawthorne began, his voice steady but tinged with a barely concealed urgency. "Today, I stand not just as a diplomat of Earth but as an advocate for truth and justice. We all cherish peace, yet it eludes us under the guise of deception. We have mourned countless lives lost in a recent tragedy, a tragedy masked as an accident but which we now understand was a calculated assault." Murmurs swelled like a rising tide as Hawthorne paused, surveying the sea of faces, some curious, others skeptical. He continued, "With profound gravity, I must reveal that this heinous act was orchestrated by operatives from Draxos, under direct orders from their government." Gasps echoed through the chamber, and Zaraku, the Draxosian counselor, rose sharply, his scales shimmering with indignation. "Preposterous!" he spat. "These are grave accusations, Hawthorne. Where is your proof?" Hawthorne's gaze locked onto Zaraku's. "The evidence will be forthcoming. But let us be clear, this is not just an attack on humanity but an affront to the principles this council stands for." The tension was palpable as Hawthorne withdrew from the podium, his statement hanging like a storm cloud over the assembly. The session adjourned amidst a flurry of whispers and conjectures, leaving Hawthorne to retreat to the relative solitude of his office, a small, austere room lined with digital screens displaying star maps and galactic data. No sooner had he entered than his communication officer, Lieutenant Marikent, approached him with a data chip. "This just came in from our intel unit on Mars, Captain. It's encrypted highly, but we managed to crack it." "Let's see it," Hawthorne said, taking the chip and slotting it into his console. Images and intercepted communications began to stream across the screen. Covert shipments of weapons, clandestine meetings, and financial transactions traced back to Draxos. It was a mosaic of treachery, pieced together through months of dangerous intelligence work. Mira stood beside him, her eyes wide with the gravity of their discovery. "This could be what we need to sway the council." "It has to be," Hawthorne replied, his voice a mix of hope and resolve. "Prepare a full report. I'll present it tomorrow. We need everyone on our side." As night fell over Xanthian, the stars seemed to whisper secrets to those willing to listen. Hawthorne spent the evening in deep discussion with delegates from allied planets, sharing his findings and shoring up support. The corridors of the diplomatic quarters were alive with hushed tones and hurried strides as alliances were tested and loyalties questioned. The next morning, as the first rays of Xanthian's dual suns pierced the skylights of the Grand Chamber, Hawthorne was ready. With the data chip secured in his pocket, he made his way back to the heart of the political arena, ready to face whatever Zaraku had planned. However, as he entered the chamber, he was intercepted by his old friend and mentor, Ambassador Thalos from the aquatic planet of Hydrones. Thalos's expression was grave, his usually bright eyes clouded with concern. "Elias, be cautious today," Thalos advised, his voice low. "Zaraku is not one to take accusations lightly. He will strike back with whatever means at his disposal." Hawthorne nodded, his resolve hardened. "I expect nothing less. But we can't let fear dictate our actions. It's time the truth came out." As the session commenced, Hawthorne took his place, surrounded by the hum of anticipation. The chamber filled rapidly, the air thick with tension and expectancy. When his turn came, he rose, the weight of his evidence both a shield and a burden. "Esteemed members," Hawthorne began, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Yesterday, I made an accusation. Today, I stand before you to substantiate that claim with unequivocal evidence." He inserted the data chip into the viewer, and the screens around the chamber flickered to life, displaying the damning evidence for all to see. Transmissions, documents, photographs, all pointing irrefutably to Draxos' involvement in the attack. Zaraku, his face a mask of fury and defiance, stood to contest the evidence. "These could be forgeries. Fabrications to cast aspersions on Draxos. Hawthorne met his gaze, unwavering. Examine the data yourselves. Verify it with your own experts. You will find it authentic and the implications undeniable. The council erupted into debate, the noise reaching a crescendo as factions argued and alliances shifted beneath the weight of Hawthorne's revelations. Above it all, Hawthorne stood firm, the beacon of a brewing storm that would either cleanse or ravage the delicate fabric of galactic peace. As the chapter closed, Hawthorne knew the hardest part of his journey was just beginning. The path to justice was fraught with peril, but retreat was no longer an option. For better or worse, the truth was out, and its echoes would resonate across the stars. The aftermath of Captain Hawthorne's revelation was like a neutron star's pulse, swift, disruptive, and far-reaching. As the grand starlight chamber emptied, the air hummed with urgency, not just among humans but across all species present. In his office, Hawthorne pored over the data from Mars once more, ensuring no detail was missed. Lieutenant Mira Kent updated the files with the latest cryptographic seals to prevent tampering. We need to keep this information ironclad, Mira. Zaraka will look for any crack, any inconsistency to exploit. Hawthorne instructed, his eyes not leaving the screen. Understood, Captain? I'll double-check the source chains and encryption algorithms. Mira responded, her fingers flying over the holographic keyboard. Outside the secure confines of his office, the corridors of the diplomatic quarters buzzed. Allies whispered commitments while adversaries watched, their silence as telling as any spoken threat. Hawthorne met with representatives of various planets in quiet corners and over nondescript meals, building a coalition with those who valued justice over convenience. One such meeting was with Ambassador Jiro of the Telnari Confederation. They sat in the dim light of the Garden Dome, a place where the hum of politics was softened by the rustle of bioluminescent foliage. Ambassador Jiro, I appreciate your support in the Council today, Hawthorne began, his tone earnest. Jiro, a being with translucent skin and reflective eyes, nodded slowly. Captain Hawthorne, your evidence is compelling, but you know the Council. Fear and favor often dictate decisions more than facts. Hawthorne sipped his drink, the liquid cool against his thoughts. I do, which is why I hope the Telnari might help verify the evidence independently. If more of us stand together, it becomes harder for the truth to be dismissed. We will consider it, Jiro replied, non-committal yet not dismissive. The ramifications of this are vast. Draxos is powerful, and their tentacles are entwined in many sectors. Which is why we must cut them, Hawthorne said sharply, his gaze fixed. Before they strangle us all. Later that day, news reached Hawthorne that a Draxosian delegate sought a private audience. Expecting a confrontation, Hawthorne prepared for a verbal duel. Instead, he found a junior diplomat, Virik, standing nervously in the reception room. Captain Hawthorne, I come because I must, Virik began, his voice a tremor of fear and defiance. There are those among us who do not agree with Zaraka's methods. I have information that might help you. Go on, Hawthorne urged, his interest piqued. Virik glanced around before continuing. Zaraka plans to discredit your evidence. He has secured a forger who will claim to have fabricated the data. Hawthorne's expression hardened. Do you have proof of this? I can get it, Virik promised, his resolve strengthening. But I also need your protection. You'll have it, Hawthorne assured him, making a mental note to arrange for Virik's safety. That evening, as Xanthian's sun set, casting long shadows over the metallic surfaces of the diplomatic enclave, Hawthorne met with his closest advisors. The mood was grim but determined. We've got a potential insider from Draxos, Hawthorne disclosed. He's willing to testify about Zaraka's plan to use a forger. Mira looked up, worry etched across her face. That's a significant risk, Captain. If Zaraka finds out. He won't, not until we're ready, Hawthorne interjected. We need to keep moving forward. Strengthen our position and expose every lie Zaraka tries to weave. The following morning, Hawthorne's resolve was tested. As he walked into the council chamber, a message from his security team flashed on his communicator. Assassination threat detected. High alert. The chamber buzzed less today. The gravity of the situation had tempered the usual cacophony. Hawthorne stepped up to the podium, his eyes scanning the council, every member now an ally or an enemy, nothing in between. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice clear and compelling. Yesterday, I presented evidence of a grave betrayal. Today, I stand before you under threat yet unwavering. Zaraka stood, his demeanor one of calculated calm. Captain Hawthorne plays the victim well. Yet, where is this so-called insider? This whistleblower who fears for his life? Convenient narratives for a weak argument. Hawthorne didn't flinch. You'll meet him soon enough, counselor. And when you do, the galaxy will see the extent of your treachery. As the session ended, Hawthorne felt the weight of the upcoming battle. It was no longer just about proving an attack. It was about preserving the integrity of the Council and the safety of the galaxy. As he returned to his quarters, the encrypted message from Virak arrived, confirming the meeting time and place. The chapter closed with Hawthorne staring into the night sky of Xanthian, the stars a tapestry of cold beauty and distant turmoil. The gathering storm was upon them, and the next moves would determine the fate of not just a planet or a people, but of the entire galaxy. The rain hammered down on the neon-lit streets of Xanthian's lower district. Unlike the pristine diplomatic sector, this part of the planet was a labyrinth of shadowed alleys, flickering signs, and the hum of concealed transactions. Captain Elias Hawthorne pulled his coat tighter as he navigated the dimly lit pathways. He wasn't alone. Lieutenant Mira Kent walked beside him, scanning their surroundings for any sign of an ambush. Virak had chosen this meeting place out of fear. Neutral ground, he had called it. But in Hawthorne's experience, places like this were rarely neutral. Someone always owned the shadows. Keep your guard up, Mira muttered, her hand resting on the concealed sidearm beneath her cloak. They reached a secluded alcove behind an old storage facility. A faint glow pulsed from an emergency beacon, casting long, jagged shadows. Then, a rustling sound. Virak emerged from behind a stack of cargo crates, his reptilian form hunched, his eyes darting in every direction. You came alone? Hawthorne asked. Virak exhaled sharply. No one can be trusted anymore. Even my own people whisper in corners, waiting to see which way the wind blows. Then speak quickly, Hawthorne said. Virak handed over a small encrypted data drive. This contains intercepted transmissions between Zaraka's personal security team and an off-world forger. They've been working for weeks to create false evidence, claiming your accusations are fabricated. Mira took the drive and plugged it into her handheld scanner. Lines of intercepted messages scrolled across the screen, time-stamped orders from Zaraka himself, authorizing funds and directives to plant counter-information. This is it, Mira whispered. This proves Zaraka's cover-up. Before Hawthorne could respond, a sharp click echoed through the alley. A sniper's rifle had just been primed. Down! Hawthorne shouted, yanking Virak to the ground as the first shot blasted into the metal wall behind them. Sparks flew. Mira rolled into cover, drawing her weapon. More gunfire erupted. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, Draxosian enforcers, their weapons glowing with energy charges. They found me! Virak gasped. We're not dead yet, Hawthorne growled. He tapped his communicator. Echo Squad, now! Almost instantly, 2 cloaked figures dropped from the rooftops, human operatives, their silenced weapons dispatching one of the attackers with precision. The remaining 2 ducked for cover, firing wildly. Mira returned fire, hitting another in the leg. He screamed and collapsed. The last one turned to run. Hawthorne sprinted forward and caught him with a solid punch to the jaw. The alien crashed into the ground unconscious. The alley fell silent, save for the distant hum of hovercraft engines. Mira wiped rain from her face. That was closer than I'd like. Virak trembled. I told you. Zaraka will do anything to bury this. Hawthorne helped him to his feet. Then we don't give him the chance. We take this to the council now. By the time they reached the secure chambers of the human delegation, the adrenaline had barely faded. Hawthorne paced while Mira decrypted the data drive, confirming its authenticity. "This is everything," she said. "Not just proof of the forger, but Zaraka's own transmissions authorizing the original attack on the human colony." Hawthorne exhaled sharply. "Then we have him." Before he could give the order to prepare for the council meeting, his communicator flashed, an urgent priority call. He answered. The face of Ambassador Delos from Hydrones appeared, his expression grim. "Elias," Delos said. "Zaraka just called an emergency session. He's demanding sanctions against Earth." Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. "On what grounds?" "Fraud," Delos said. "He claims the evidence you presented was manufactured by human intelligence agencies to undermine the Galactic Council. He's calling for your removal." Mira clenched her fists. "He's moving faster than we thought." Hawthorne nodded. "Which means he's desperate. And that gives us an advantage." The chamber was already in chaos when Hawthorne arrived. Zaraka stood at the podium, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. "Human deception knows no bounds," Zaraka declared. "They fabricate evidence, slander our name, and seek to destabilize this council. We demand immediate action against Earth." The murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered in doubt. Hawthorne strode to his seat, locking eyes with Zaraka. "You're running out of lies," he said evenly. Zaraka sneered. "And you, Captain, are running out of time." The council speaker, an ancient and revered member of the Krivani species, raised a hand. Silence fell. "Captain Hawthorne," the speaker intoned, "do you have a response?" Hawthorne stood, taking his time to scan the room before speaking. "Yes, Madam Speaker, I do. And it will not be words, but proof." He turned to Mira, who activated the main display. The intercepted transmissions filled the air, playing in real time. Zaraka's voice echoed through the chamber. "Ensure the evidence is falsified before the next session. This must lead back to the humans. If they cannot be discredited, we will be forced to escalate." The chamber went silent. Zaraka's face paled, an impressive feat for a Draxosian. "This is manipulation," he bellowed. "These recordings could be doctored." Hawthorne didn't even blink. They were verified by third-party encryption analysts. Their authenticity is indisputable. Murmurs turned to shouts. Council members spoke rapidly in their own languages. Some demanded Zaraka's immediate expulsion, others called for a full investigation. Then, a voice from the Hydrones delegation rose above the rest. "I motion for an emergency vote," Delos declared, "to determine whether Councillor Zaraka has violated the sacred trust of this council." Zaraka's mouth opened, but no words came. He knew this was slipping from his grasp. The speaker turned to the assembly. "Very well. The vote shall commence." A digital tally appeared above the chamber, each delegation casting their decision. One by one, names lit up. Hawthorne's fingers clenched the edge of the podium. The numbers rolled in. By the time the last vote was cast, the results were clear. Guilty. A stunned silence followed. Zaraka swayed, his claws tightening into fists. "You fools!" he snarled. "You think this ends here? Draxos does not forgive." Guards approached, ready to escort him from the chamber. But Hawthorne leaned in, his voice quiet but deadly. "No, Counselor. We don't forget either." As Zaraka was led away, the council erupted into discussion of what came next: sanctions, diplomatic recalibrations, reparations. Hawthorne simply sat back. It wasn't over. But it was a start. The chamber had not settled. The echoes of the council's decision lingered, hanging in the air like the static before a storm. Councillor Zaraka, now stripped of his authority, stood motionless as security personnel flanked him, awaiting the speaker's final directive. Hawthorne leaned against the polished marble of the council's main podium, his mind calculating the next steps. The battle for truth had been won, but the war for justice was far from over. The revelation of Draxos's involvement in the human colony attack was just the surface of a much deeper wound in the galactic political structure. The speaker, an aged Krivani whose translucent tendrils shimmered under the chamber's lights, finally addressed the assembly. Councillor Zaraku has been found guilty of conspiracy against this council and the violation of intergalactic peace accords. Effective immediately, he is stripped of his diplomatic position, and the Draxosian Empire is required to respond to these charges before an official tribunal. Murmurs rippled through the gathered dignitaries. Some whispered in approval, others in unease. The power balance of the council had shifted, and every faction was recalculating its position. Zaraku's reptilian eyes burned with unmasked rage. This council, he spat, has allowed itself to be manipulated by humans, a species barely out of their planetary cradle. Do you think Draxos will stand for this humiliation? His voice slithered through the room like a venomous hiss. Hawthorne stepped forward. Your empire won't have a choice. Your lies are exposed, your war plans dismantled before they could take root. The council may offer you a tribunal, but I assure you, Earth is not as forgiving. Zaraku snarled, his scaled hands clenching into fists, but the security officers moved in before he could lash out. They led him away, his footsteps heavy against the chamber floor. Even as he disappeared beyond the council's exit, Hawthorne knew this was only the beginning. The Draxosian Empire had lost the battle, but their thirst for power wouldn't be extinguished by a single political defeat. The speaker turned back to the gathered representatives. Now we must discuss reparations and the enforcement of sanctions upon the Draxosian Empire. A Vortari ambassador, his insectoid limbs clicking together as he stood, spoke first. The attack on the human colony was an act of war. Draxos must pay restitution, not just to Earth, but to all of us. How many other worlds might have suffered had Captain Hawthorne not uncovered the truth? Delos, the Hydrones ambassador, nodded in agreement. We must ensure that no power, no species, can act in such deceit without consequences. Hawthorne listened, measuring the weight of each statement. He had won this fight, but now came the delicate act of securing lasting peace. A Telnari delegate rose, his skin shifting between hues of concern and calculation. Reparations are necessary, but Draxos remains a formidable power. If we humiliate them, it could drive their empire into open war. We must act with strategy, not vengeance. The room bristled with divided opinions. Some wanted immediate, harsh sanctions. Others feared the repercussions of cornering a wounded beast. Hawthorne knew what had to be done. He stepped forward. I agree that Draxos must be held accountable, but we must also ensure stability. If we impose harsh reparations without structure, we risk provoking further conflict. What we need is oversight, strict monitoring of their military activities, trade embargoes on weaponry, and the dismantling of their covert intelligence networks. Silence filled the chamber as delegates exchanged glances. The suggestion was logical, tactical. It prevented future aggression without forcing Draxos into a desperate counterattack. The speaker considered Hawthorne's words, then addressed the council. Let the vote decide. The chamber's great holographic display shimmered to life once more as each delegation cast their decision. Hawthorne stood rigid, waiting as the numbers climbed. One by one, names lit up. Approved. The speaker inclined her head. The motion is passed. Effective immediately, Draxos is placed under intergalactic sanctions, and an oversight committee will be established to ensure compliance. Hawthorne exhaled, feeling the weight on his shoulders ease, if only slightly. The council had taken action. Earth was safe, for now. After the session, Hawthorne and his team gathered in their secure quarters. Mara Kent leaned back in her chair, stretching. That went better than I expected. I thought half the council would turn spineless at the last moment. Hawthorne smirked. They almost did. But the evidence was undeniable. He turned to Virik, the former Draxosian diplomat who had risked everything to expose the truth. You saved more lives today than you'll ever know. Virik's tail twitched nervously. I won't be safe anymore. Even stripped of power, Zaraku has many loyalists. Hawthorne nodded. We'll ensure your safety. You did the right thing. A knock at the door interrupted them. A junior officer entered, saluting. Captain, there's a transmission for you. Private channel. Hawthorne exchanged a glance with Mira before following the officer to the secure comms room. He activated the transmission, and the screen flickered to reveal an unknown source, shrouded in a haze of static. Then, a voice, deep and deliberate. Captain Hawthorne. You may have won today, but Draxos does not forget. Hawthorne's jaw tightened. Who is this? The voice chuckled darkly. Consider me the next chapter of this story. You exposed a single operation. But do you really believe we have shown you all our cards? The transmission cut out. The screen went black. Mara entered, her expression cautious. Who was that? Hawthorne exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the console. The next problem we're going to have to solve. Mara folded her arms. You think Draxos will try something else? They already are, Hawthorne replied. We just don't know where yet. He looked out at the star-streaked horizon through the window. The battle in the Council was over, but beyond those stars, in the dark reaches of space, the real war was still waiting.